Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video, and today we are going to talk about doing freehand brocade patterns on on things like cloaks and just sort of other spaces. This is a great way to take a large flat space and add some visual confusion to it and make it so you don't have to get your blends exact. That's one of the great things about these kinds of freehand patterns, is it's actually a way to cheat. So if you have, and it sounds crazy, but oftentimes it can take a lot of work to get a smooth blend on a large flat surface, especially if you've got a lot of ridges or something like this. Whereas a pattern might be a good way to create some visual confusion, to add some detail, and make the miniature look a lot better. Now, so very quickly, let's just talk about what I mean by visual confusion. So when you have blank, empty space, like the back of this cloak, you got some highlights, and you'll recognize our old friend from the previous video here, Mr. Chaos Warrior from the War Colors video. But when you've got a large flat space like this, notice how the sculptor added in some elements of visual confusion by having these pockmarks, these cuts out of the cloak. In addition to fitting, because it's chaos, it also helps break up this big flat space. But we're going to talk about some ways we can also work on that, and we can do that with patterns. Now, a lot of you might instantly be thinking, I can't do patterns. I have no skill with freehand, yada, yada, yada. Yes, you can. Yes, you do, because this couldn't be simpler. That's what's wonderful about this. It is a easy method. What I'm going to show you, it's a trick. So here we go. What are we going to use? Okay. Well, we need a paint that's going to cover really well, that's going to align with the base color. So you want something near white or gray that has either the warm or cold tone of what you're going for. In this case, because I got the violet, I'm going to use this Vallejo Game Extra Opaque Heavy Warm Gray. Now, the critical part is when you're doing this kind of freehand, really the secret is this. You have to get it to flow really well. So we're going to use some of our Liquitex Flow Aid. So I mix basically 1-to-1 with my paint. Okay? Now, you can sketch out your pattern beforehand. I'm not going to worry about that for this. We're just going to start dropping a pattern on here. So I'm going to start over here on this side. And what I'm going to do is I think he'll have a little cut, kind of like some sharp lines. And then some semicircles. And then a semicircle. And we'll do another sharp line. And the key is you need a very, very, very good brush for this. You want a really sharp brush. You're going to be going back to the paint often, and you're just barely touching the model. Okay? You're just letting that paint wick right off of there. That's why we have the Flow Aid. Okay? Cool. Looks good. All right, now let's mess that up a little bit. Let's go in another direction. Let's kind of go this direction with a straight line and then come up and over. Just create a little space in there. I'm just making a pattern. Doesn't really matter what it is. The point is that once you add enough of the pattern, the little inconsistencies, your little tiny errors, they won't be visible because your eyes will get lost in the confusion of it. So here, let's put in a little shape. Again, I didn't plan this out beforehand. I'm just throwing some stuff on the model. Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll go down here and we'll go in this direction. Very sharp brush, very controlled light touches, very liquid paint through the Flow Aid. If you mess up a little, don't worry. You can come back and fix it later. It's no big deal. It's very hard to make an actual error here as long as you don't, sort of squish your brush against it. So just light, confident strokes. The flow aid really is the secret. The combination of the flow aid plus the heavy paint, or plus the extra opaque paint, means you get nice, solid coverage first time, which is what we want. Here, we're just going to do some straight lines. And then we'll run a line down here. Again, you don't even have to match the pattern. I'm just going to cut straight through that other one. Because why not? Let's get crazy. And let's run another one through there. Let's go like this. Okay. And let's do one like this. So now we've got something that looks like that. We've got a pretty awesome pattern. At least I think so. And what is this pattern? Pfft, heck if I know. Like, just something I decided to draw, I guess. Again, you just kind of let the pattern find itself. Now, if you want, and sometimes I've done this, you could kind of sketch it out first. You know, you could draw it on a piece of paper, make sure it's all going to work and look good. And then I would just keep doing this across the cloak, right? I would just carry on a new pattern over here. Don't make it match. Just do something new, right? Okay, and I would just trace this all the way across the cloak. Just quick, lots of lines, little dots. The key is you want lots of individual strokes, lines, things moving in different directions. That's the secret to this, okay? Don't try to do an even ordered pattern. Your brain is... Human brains are trained to pick up on patterns, okay? So if you're trying to do like a checkerboard, like when you do a checkerboard, you know, these squares, exact hash lines, if there's even one of those that is slightly wrong, your brain's going to see it very quickly because it notices inconsistencies in patterns like that. However, when the pattern is almost completely random, has no real order to it, instead, it all just blends in and you don't really see any inconsistencies. Like there's little lines in here that aren't as sharp as they could be, but who cares? You don't notice. Okay, so now we've put the pattern on. You notice what I started with, by the way. I didn't mention this because it was from the last video, but I started with a basic cloak that I had zenithal highlighted and then coated with a pink. And that's what you want to start from with your brocade pattern. You want to have your base down, but you don't need to worry about getting the blends perfect because all this crap we're going to put on top is going to cover that up. So you just kind of want some basic, you know, sketch colors in there. This works great with sketch style painting, where you start with a zenithal, you reinforce some of your highlight, and then you take a glaze color and go over the top. Perfect. Okay? All right, now comes the secret. So what we're going to do now is, and by the way, if I stretch this across the whole cloak, you'll really start to see the effect take off. Like, once you do the entire space, that's when that visual confusion really fires, because the brain can't see anything else. So, we started with just our heavy warm gray. Now, I'm just going to grab some Fantasy Games Elendi Little Violet. I could also instead use an ink, like a War Colors Violet ink. Whatever you want. I'm going to make a glaze out of this quickly, because that's the next step. With your brocade pattern, you don't want it to actually stand out. We use a strong color because we're going to use undershading as our friend here. Okay? So we're going to take some of this and we're going to really thin it down into a glaze. Now, because it's scale color, I can pretty much just use water. If you're using, you know, another line of paint like Vallejo, you may want to use some like glaze medium or thinner medium to avoid it going glossy. We're going to test. See how we're barely color changing that? That's what we want. Okay. So we get some of the paint on our brush. We wick off the excess because we don't want it to go crazy. We're not looking for a wash. And then we want to make sure this is dry, which it is now. And then we're just going to go ahead and run it straight down. Long, confident strokes right in with it. Okay? And instantly we've color shifted it back into the cloak. We're going to let that glaze dry. Okay? We're going to make sure that that is completely dry. And then what we're going to do is just kind of with these thin glazes, where we want our shadows to be, we're going to do some more glazes. So for example, up here at the top of the cloak, that's where I had it originally darker. we're just going to do the same thing with some quick, thin glazes to bring back our stronger color, okay, or to bring back our shadows, okay? So, okay, that's close enough. So now what I'm going to do is just up here, pull my paint up to where I want the darker color. Right? So now I'm just building back in that shadow. You do as many glazes as you like to get it, you know, sort of in line in the way that you want. Part of the trick here is you can make, the more glazes you put on, the more it's going to look like a faded pattern in the actual cloak. Okay? So if I were to do, say, 3 or 4 glazes, I could knock almost all the color out of this. So it really looked like a very faded pattern. And then you could do some stronger freehand on top of it. Doing that kind of layered freehand is even another tricky way to hide your mistakes, to smooth your blends, etc. Okay? So, once that's completely dry, I can then just keep putting on my glazes to get where I need to be. Now, your other trick to kind of bring it home if you want. You can stop there, by the way. You can just work that brocade pattern. We can slap down a couple more quick glazes. It's really a very fast process. But if we want to take it even farther, there are points on this that should be brighter as well. So you can take a little of your original color, that sort of original heavy warm gray that I had. I'm going to mix it with just a bit of my purple so I get a nice light color. And then very carefully what I'm going to do is where the pattern would be highlighted, I come in and I actually create some highlights on it just to keep it looking like, and you want to kind of match where the actual highlights on the cloak are. So if the pattern was running over this ridge, I would grab every ridge, right? And we just kind of reinforce those, and that reinforces the light that we've created. And it actually adds even more to the visual confusion. It's a very light touch. Like I said, this is sort of an optional final step if you really want to take this up. Like this is kind of, this part of the cloak is like flaring out. So let's just hit that edge there real quick. Right? Just so we get a little bit more light back into it. And then again, I like, if I want to take this down a little darker, yeah, I'm still not totally happy with how dark that is. Okay, no problem. Let's start about right there. And you can see how that's really starting to fade out. And that's it. That's all it is. That's the secret. You go, if you really, like, the tighter you do your pattern, the thinner, the more you push together your little crazy random lines, the more you'll kind of hide what's going on. In fact, I don't like that. And if you need to correct, you go back to your original purple. You don't glaze it. So, for example, like, I don't like that triangle. I want a little space in the middle there. Okay. There we go. It's small enough of a space that it's just going to basically blend into the rest of the purple once it dries. So, there you go. That's it. It's that easy. I could just carry this pattern on around the rest of the cloak, then glaze it all over, and what I would have is this, what seems like a very complex design with lots of fades and stuff like that. Like, it blends into the cloak and matches the shadows. It was actually very quick and easy because I just laid it down in a single color and then just used some quick glazes to build back in the shadows, touched a few highlights to bring back up the highlights, and I called it a day. So, there you go. That's simple brocade patterns. It's great, like I said, for cloaks. It can really create some good sort of visual breakup, visual confusion in large flat spaces. It's a great thing to do, especially with characters, to make them stand out. And it helps you because you don't have to worry about getting perfect blends over large, flat spaces. So, there you are. Hope you enjoyed that. Give it a like if you did. Subscribe for more hobby cheating in the future. And share this with anybody if you think they would like the technique. That's always the nicest thing you can do and deeply appreciated. And as always, we'll see you next time.